Hey everyone, I've got a really exciting video today. I want to talk about some books that every programmer or web developer or software engineer should read. I don't know if you can see behind me very well, but I've got quite a bit of books back here on a bookshelf. I'm an old person, I guess. I'm weird. I actually like to have a physical copy of a book in my hand to read, as opposed to a digital copy. I think being able to get away from the computer and kind of do the reading away from technology, I don't know, it helps me focus more. If I'm on the computer, there's email, there's Facebook, there's Twitter, there's this, there's that. There's so many distractions that can get in the way. And so I find having that physical book just really helps me focus and stay away from the computer screens. So the first book that, well, actually, there's a caveat. Let me start by saying I'm going to talk about quite a few books, like 9 books or so. Probably should have came up with 10 and made like a cool top 10 books or something, but yeah, I'm not that creative. Anyway, some of these books are actually not for all web developers or all programmers or all software engineers. I'm going to speak about each book to explain who the audience is, in my opinion. But the first two are specifically, in my opinion, for everybody. So let's get started. The first book is one, oddly enough, my favorite book, but also a book I don't have. I've actually bought this book 3 times. I actually have a digital copy of it because it wasn't available at the time. The 20th anniversary edition wasn't available physically yet, but I was able to get an early copy if I bought it digitally, so I actually have the PDF of it. But The Pragmatic Programmer is the book everyone should read. If I could, force all new hires or all engineers on my teams to read any single book, this is the book that I would choose. It's that important. There's just so much great content about really just being a professional in the industry. As a programmer, just being a professional, doing things the right way, caring about your work, avoiding like the broken window effect where, an old building has a broken window and then all of a sudden lots more windows start showing up broken because like nobody cares, right? And how that kind of correlates into software with tech debt and things like that. I mean, it's an amazing book. I've read it so many times, probably 5, and every time I read it, it's like I catch new glimpses of some content that I had missed previously that I wish I could have known. So it's just like there's always something new I catch when I read through it again. So I can't say this enough. The Pragmatic Programmer is the book that everyone needs to read in this industry, or anybody who's doing even just web development, programming, software engineering, whatever you want to call yourself. Doesn't matter. This book is for you, 100%. That's really the only book I have to talk about. But I have a lot of books, as you can see in the background, and I wanted to talk about some other ones. The rest of them I actually do have on hand, so I'm going to just show them to you. In addition to Pragmatic Programmer, we've got Clean Code here from Robert C. Martin. It's a handbook of agile software craftsmanship. It's a really good book for learning about clean code and what clean code really is, like how to write better code. It's definitely tailored more toward object-oriented programming. So if you're doing some type of newer or just functional programming language, it's still applicable to some degree, I'm sure, but it's definitely more tailored toward object-oriented programming because, of course, Uncle Bob, or as he's known, or Robert Martin, is a big object-oriented guy. And yeah, it's a great book. I don't care what you think about him as a person. Like, I think the content of the book is great, and it's definitely worth a read for everybody. Again, no matter really what your role is in the industry, it's just got some really good information for coders in general. Okay, so now we're going to start getting into the nitty gritty, as I'll call it. This is what I would call the Design Pattern Bible. And so this is, again, a book that is really tailored toward everybody, but is really, many of the patterns are object-oriented specific, as you can see in the title, Elements of Reusable Object-Oriented Software. So if you're doing functional programming and not really doing much object-oriented stuff, then it might not be as pertinent to you. But there are very good design patterns in this book that you should be familiar with. Now, the caveat on this book is that it is a difficult read. It is not a book that you pick up and you read from like front to back in a sitting or something. Like, it's more like a reference guide, a reference book. It's that's how I use it, is just reference material. So you remember, oh, what was the strategy pattern about, and you just go look it up real quick. So I feel like you need to kind of already know some of like these design patterns before you really get a lot of value out of a book like this. And that's, like I said, more of a reference book. So if you are not familiar with design patterns, you're going to want to learn them first. And I've got a book for that. There are many books for that. But the Head First Design Pattern book is probably my favorite. It really breaks down the problems into easy to understand units that you can pretty easily follow. It's a lot more easy to read than the design pattern book. So if you need to learn about design patterns to help your object-oriented programming, then I definitely recommend this one. And I guess I don't really have time to explain a lot about what the design patterns are, but just know that there's a lot of things we do in software that like has been done before, right? And you might think you're inventing the wheel here, right? But you don't need to reinvent the wheel. If you knew about these patterns, they've kind of been tried and tested, right? And we know they work. Once you know these patterns, you can apply them when you have those problems in your software, and you can come up with really good solutions that have standed the test of time, I guess. Okay, this is another book that has been recommended to me in the past. It's called 97 Things Every Programmer Should Know. And it's just got some really good material in it. I don't really have a whole lot to say on it. I think it's a good book that everybody should read. That's really all I can say. It's got lots of good information and is a pretty highly recommended book when people are looking for books to read in programming. And it's, not specific to any one language, so that's a good thing. The DDD Bible, in this case, I always refer to something as a Bible when it's kind of like the go-to book on a subject, but it's hard to read. So Domain-Driven Design by Eric Evans, the Blue Book. This book is absolutely amazing. It'll teach you a lot about domain-driven design, which is an amazing concept to understand and can really help you write much better software once you understand, its use cases, I guess. But again, it's a kind of difficult read. There's probably many better books for learning domain-driven design for newcomers, but definitely a really good book for those of you interested. So I highly recommend it. Now I've got a couple of books that are more specific that, not everyone will need. But if you do TypeScript, I had to bring this book out because it is amazing. Probably the most highly recommended book when it comes to learning TypeScript. I've seen people say as much so as like, you don't know TypeScript until you've read this book. So I actually still need to read it. I've thumbed through it and I see some really good content, but I haven't had a chance to read it yet because I've been pretty busy. But amazing book, Programming TypeScript. It's an O'Reilly book. Boris Cherney, and I've seen him on Reddit, I believe in like the TypeScript subreddit before, so he frequents the community. If you know Python, or if you're learning Python and you're trying to get a job doing Python, you want this book. Elements of Programming Interviews in Python. Highly recommended book when it comes to trying to get an interview or pass an interview with high-tech companies like FANG, like Facebook and Apple, Netflix, Google, like these companies that do these very difficult like whiteboard coding exercises for their interviews. If you do those in Python, that's my recommended approach, unless you're like, already familiar with another language like Java or C++ or something that you want to use, like fine. But if you want to use a really good language for those types of algorithm type problems, Python is the go-to for that, and this book will help you learn how to do it and understand it really well. The last book that I have on this video to discuss is another interview book. So, sorry about that. Cracking the Coding Interview. This one's by Gail Lockman McDowell. So again, this is another book that comes highly recommended. And when I'm saying that, I mean from research that I've done in the past on what are good books for these types of things, this is like one of the books that would pop up the most. This book really gives you like hands-on examples and problems from the same types of things from the previous book, like those FANG interviews. If you want to, work for these big companies in Seattle or in Silicon Valley that are the ones paying the big bucks to these people, these engineers, like you're going to need to read a book like this and understand it. Of course, the thing that people do in the industry for this nowadays is leak code, and leak code is great for learning some of this stuff and practicing. But this book is probably what you do before you start the leak coding, just to give it more context and to help you really understand the things that you're doing. So highly recommend it. So that's all that I have for today. I've got plenty of great books. There's many others, but some of these are like what I consider the most important, and definitely the most important is the one I started with, the Pragmatic Programmer. If you only have time or patience to read a single book in your whole career, I think it should be Pragmatic Programmer. And then after that, if you have time for another, Clean Code is my recommendation. And then many of these other books, depending on what you want to learn, go for it. I'd love to hear about any other books that you've read that you found to be like super valuable. I'll definitely add to my collection. I've got plenty of room on my bookshelf back here. So let me know in the comments if there's some other books that programmers would be interested in, and maybe I'll do a follow-up video if I get some good recommendations. But that's it for this video. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and we'll see you next time.